This is a picture of what our universe of work looks like. These are the 7 global media conglomerates that control the entertainment and media industries. You see Viacom, News Corp, Time Warner, CBS, Comcast, Sony, and Walt Disney. And they are highly vertically integrated companies. They have properties that range from publishing to radio, television. There are billboard companies in there, movies, obviously. They've got all of this, and that's concentrated into these 7 companies. Now, if you go to the next slide, you'll see where AFTRA's points of direct leverage are on this chart. And you'll notice that that's concentrated primarily in television and radio. If you go to the next slide, you see SAG's points of direct leverage, again, concentrating heavily on the television networks and on the movie studios. Now, the next slide is what we're talking about. That is a representation of the points of direct leverage for SAG-AFTRA. That is bargaining power right there. That's what leverage looks like. That gives us leverage across more of the properties of these companies, and it's going to allow us to exert more pressure on them to get the gains that we need.
Rebecca?
Our work is being, hey Gabby, thanks. Our work is being created and consumed in ways that we couldn't have even imagined 10 years ago, much less when Screen Actors Guild and AFTRA were founded. So in terms of this, we have a unified strategy now and maximum bargaining power that will ensure actors, broadcasters, performers, newspersons, all categories of work have a strong voice in how their contracts and their work is created, and that way they can receive a fair share of industry revenues.
Amy, we think it's you to tell us something very interesting about benefits.
Yeah. As you saw, our work is completely split between SAG and AFTRA. The work in the media industry is split between the 2 unions. So thousands of members are missing out on their health and pension and retirement benefits because their earnings are split. Without a merger, this critical situation is only going to grow worse and worse. Merging the unions removes a major hurdle to solving this problem and could allow plan trustees to develop a single plan that takes advantage of all of our covered earnings, and that will help members qualify for benefits.
All right, it's the plan. The ballots are in the mail and on the way to you. And some members have already received their ballot packages. When you receive your package, you will have all of the key elements of the merger plan, including the SAG-AFTRA Constitution, SAG-AFTRA dues and initiation fee structure, the SAG-AFTRA merger agreement, and the pension and health and retirement feasibility report, and helpful materials like summaries and additional Q&As. I ask you to please look over all these documents, which is a very show business term. If you can stand it, read them. Because they really do contain answers to your many questions. A lot of work went into these documents. They make a lot of sense. Take a little time and read them and just see how effective what we've done is, and know what our future is. Thanks.
All right, we're going to sort of walk you very briefly through the documents that make up the merger agreement. I'm going to start with the SAG-AFTRA Constitution. It covers 4 basic areas as the framework for the union that we all hope very fervently we are members of in the very near future. Membership, national officers, national board, and convention, and I'll go very briefly through them. The eligibility criteria for membership is very similar to current SAG requirements. Members will need to perform work in the industry to join the organization. People who are trying to get work or qualifying through work as a background performer must have completed 3 days of covered work, so that's something that should be relatively familiar to all of us. National officers, this is one of the places where using the interest-based process, we found a lovely, powerful hybrid moving forward. There will be 2 directly nationally elected members of the National Officer Corps, the President and the Secretary-Treasurer. They will be directly elected by the membership every 2 years. There will also be 8 vice presidents elected and then elected by delegates at the convention. Yes, it was an erection joke, just laugh and move on. And I will explain convention in a couple of moments when I get to that part. I've made the national president laugh, that's really the only reason I'm here. The national board will consist of approximately 80 members, one half of whom will be elected to 2-year terms. These people are all directly elected to their positions by the membership of the union. That makes up your national board. And finally, the convention. The convention will be held every 2 years, and the delegates to the convention will be elected by the locals from which they attend. And if you have a certain allotment of people who are allowed numerically to go to your convention, and 3 of them can't make it and the rest do, the full voting strength of your delegates is divided among the people who attend the election. So there are not this incredibly convoluted system of I represent that person and not this person. You have the locals' votes that attend convention, and they are spread amongst the delegates who make it to the convention and vote up for the business of the union. I now hand it off, I believe, to Amy for the fee structure.
Here's the money part. Putting together the SAG-AFTRA fee structure was a real challenge, and because SAG and AFTRA actually have very, very different financial setups, we think that we came up with a really terrific compromise between the two. We had a couple of driving goals when we were putting this together. One was that we wanted to be in the black starting year 1. Both unions right now are running deficits. We wanted to make sure that that ended, and we were running at a profit immediately. Not at a profit, but we were not losing money right from the beginning. This structure anticipates that. We also wanted to we didn't want to have any layoffs anticipated. So this includes everybody in the organization. All of our staffs will be in the organization, but we simply anticipate over time, with the normal attrition in both organizations, it will end up getting more trimmed and more focused. We also, the other major goal that we had was that by the end of 5 years, we would have a 6-month reserve in the bank. And that's absolutely critical if this union wants to be able to take action, the strong actions that we were going to need to take going forward to deal with the changes in this industry. So as you can see, the initiation fee in the new union will be $3,000. This is more than either SAG or AFTRA is charging now, but it is less than what it costs to join both unions, which, as we know, is what's pretty much needed at this point if you want to be able to make a living in this industry. It's becoming increasingly impossible to belong to simply one union. You really need to belong to 2. The base dues, again, would be $198. Again, this is more than SAG or AFTRA individually, but it is $50 less than joining both, but then paying what we would pay to both unions going forward. Work dues, again, is a compromise between the two. It's set at 1.575% of your earnings, up to a cap of $500,000. Again, that is a direct compromise between what the 2 unions are charging now. We have 3 areas where there will be fee structure waivers. Any SAG-AFTRA member who is working only on a single, that would be national or local, or a freelance broadcaster contract only, their work dues would be 1.575% for their earnings under $100,000, just like everybody else. And it would be 0.274% for earnings from $100,000 to a cap of $250,000. That is for people who don't have the opportunity to take any kind of freelance work. As soon as if they, for any reason, they take a freelance job outside of broadcast, they would be put back at the regular national rate. We recognize right now both unions have base dues and or initiation fee discounts in certain areas. In markets where it's important for organizing purposes, the new union will have discounts in those areas as well. And finally, the Screen Actors Guild has a policy where members over 70 years old with at least 20 years membership in the union who are earning under $5,000 a year do not have to pay base dues. That is going to continue in the new union. If you look here, this gives you an example of some of the work dues that you could expect to be paying. As he said, it represents a compromise between what the two unions are charging now. An important thing to note is for members that are earning between $5,000 and $100,000, we're talking about working class people. They will see, for SAG members, if they're earning that in SAG right now, they will be seeing a reduction in their work dues, which is going to be, I'm sure, very welcome. The one area where you're going to see a fairly substantial rise in work dues is for our most fortunate members. We're going to be asking them to kick in just a little bit more.
The merger agreement is one of the documents that's included in your packet. This document lays out the transition for the combining of two separate unions into one. I noticed on Twitter actually that there's one question that's already come up from someone named Sophia who's asked what the effective date would be if on March 30th, 2012, which is when the ballots are counted, at least 60% of the voting membership of each union votes to approve the merger, then on that date at midnight, the new union, SAG-AFTRA, would come into existence. So for this purpose, the effective date is March 30th, 2012. With respect to membership status and conversion, on the effective date, anyone who is a member in either union will automatically become a member of SAG-AFTRA on that effective date. With respect to the representation rights, this merger document has been crafted to ensure continuity of representation, and SAG-AFTRA will assume all of the collective bargaining agreements currently that either union is currently signatory to. So either an AFTRA agreement or a SAG agreement will become a collective bargaining agreement by the new organization, SAG-AFTRA, as of the effective date. And both parties will have the ability to negotiate in areas where either union currently has a collective bargaining agreement or relationship. With respect to the initial SAG-AFTRA National Board and officers, for the interim period, all members of the current AFTRA and SAG National Boards will be combined and integrated into the initial SAG-AFTRA National Board for the interim period. There will also be initial co-presidents, the current president of AFTRA, Roberta Reardon, and the current president of Screen Actors Guild, Ken Howard. There will be co-presidents. There will be initial co-secretary treasurers. There will also be 8 other initial vice president positions, and those positions will be filled by current officers of either SAG or AFTRA. The transition period will end as of the first convention and the first elections. The first convention will be held in Los Angeles, but no later than the end of September 2013, and the first elections for president and secretary treasurer will occur shortly before that convention. And national board members and delegates to the convention will also be directly elected within the 45-day period immediately preceding the initial convention.
Thanks, Tom. Continuing on about the merger agreement, first, the initial rules, regulations, and policies of SAG-AFTRA will be comprised of the current rules, regulations, and policies of both Screen Actors Guild and AFTRA. And should there be any conflict between those rules or policies, those conflicts will be worked out through the initial executive committee. Important example of one such example is the existence of committees in SAG-AFTRA, which will carry over from the existing committees of SAG and AFTRA, and any inconsistencies will be resolved in that process. In addition, the AFTRA and SAG agency rules will also carry over as they are now, and in areas of previously overlapping jurisdiction, they'll apply to employment that's covered by each union's collective bargaining agreements. So in essence, there'll be continuity between the existing policies as to agency as well. Another important policy that will carry over from SAG and AFTRA now are SAG's Global Rule 1 and AFTRA's No Contract, No Work rules, both of which will continue to apply as they do now in each union's area of traditional jurisdiction. And again, the initial executive committee will resolve any conflicts or differences between the application of those rules. As far as locals and local membership go, in any city where there is an AFTRA local and a SAG branch, the AFTRA local and SAG branch or division will be combined into a single SAG-AFTRA local, and all of the members who are members of that branch or local will become members of the new SAG-AFTRA branch or local. For dual members, they'll be assigned to whichever local is nearest to their residence on file with either union, and if there's any issues with that, they can appeal that to the initial executive committee. Finally, as to the initial governance of those locals, the initial local board of each SAG-AFTRA local will consist of all prior members of the SAG branch or division board and all AFTRA local board members in that area. And the local constitution will start out as the constitution that's attached as Exhibit 1 or Appendix 1 to the SAG-AFTRA constitution, subject to each local being able to adopt their own individualized constitution and submit that through the process. In addition, in each of those local boards, the votes will be weighted in the board so that the former AFTRA local board members and the SAG branch or division board members will each have 50% of the vote in that initial local board.